What's the most embarrassing thing you've ever said in a job interview? I was fresh out of college and desperately looking for a job. I had applied to dozens of positions and finally landed an interview at a marketing agency that I had been eyeing for months. I was nervous but excited and had practiced answering every question I could think of. On the day of the interview, I woke up early, put on my best suit, and arrived at the agency with time to spare. I took a few deep breaths, gathered my portfolio, and walked in with confidence. Things started off well, and I felt like I was acing the interview. Then, the interviewer asked me about my experience with social media. I thought I had the perfect answer and replied confidently, "Oh, I'm very familiar with social media. I use Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter all the time." The interviewer raised an eyebrow and said, "That's great. But can you tell me about your experience with LinkedIn?" My heart dropped. I had forgotten about LinkedIn. I had only created an account a few weeks prior and had never used it. I panicked and blurted out the first thing that came to mind. "Oh, yeah, LinkedIn. I actually just created an account a few days ago, but I'm still getting the hang of it." The interviewer looked at me skeptically, and I knew I had blown it. I tried to recover, stumbling through the rest of the interview, but it was no use. As soon as I left the agency, I knew I had messed up. I didn't get the job, and I was left feeling embarrassed and humiliated. I couldn't believe I had forgotten about LinkedIn, a platform that was essential for the job I had applied for. It was a harsh lesson, but it taught me to always do my research and be honest about my experience. But that wasn't the most embarrassing thing I had ever said in a job interview. No, that happened a few months later. I had applied for a position at a law firm, and I was thrilled when I got called in for an interview. I was nervous but prepared, and I thought I had covered all my bases. The interview was going smoothly, and I was feeling good about my chances. Then, the interviewer asked me about my experience with contracts. I confidently replied that I had taken a course on contracts in college and that I was well versed in the subject matter. The interviewer nodded and said, "That's great. Can you give me an example of a contract you've worked on in the past?" I froze. I couldn't think of a single contract I had ever worked on. My mind went blank, and I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. "I once signed a contract with my roommate to split the cost of groceries." The interviewer looked at me incredulously. "That's the only contract you've ever worked on?" I could feel my face turning red as I realized how ridiculous I sounded. I tried to backpedal and explain that it was just a small example. But the damage had already been done. Needless to say, I didn't get the job. I was mortified, and it took me a while to recover from the embarrassment. But it was a valuable lesson. Always be prepared to give specific examples in a job interview. And never try to make something up on the spot. It's better to be honest and admit that you don't have an example than to make yourself look foolish.